Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for coming. It's amazing to me to see so many people on a weekday evening giving up their time to discuss what I think is really one of the great social problems confronting American society today. I also have to offer my thanks to Ari Cohn and the Post-Prison Education Program, who have done so much to organise this visit for me today, and I really appreciate the magnificent work that they've done. And I've learned in the short time that I've been here a tremendous amount about the extraordinary work that's going on in Washington. I thought what I would do today, or this evening, is talk a bit about the research I've been working on over the last 15 years that tries to understand the scope, the causes, the consequences of the growth in incarceration in the United States. And this is a trend that dates from the 1970s, as we'll see. And I think it's telling us something fundamentally important about American society. And the idea that I want to talk about specifically is an idea not coined by myself, as we'll see, but a sociologist, David Garland. And this idea is mass incarceration. Mass incarceration. And it's this idea, I think, of mass incarceration that should challenge us to think about what should be the role of criminal punishment in our society, what notions of fairness and equality and citizenship and democracy should we aspire to. So let me begin. Mass incarceration. When I think of the penal system in the United States, this is the image that often comes to mind for me. So this is a correctional facility in California, at Chino, and this is a gymnasium that has been converted to a housing unit because of conditions of overcrowding in the Californian penal system. And we can see that the people in this photograph are largely men, largely young men of colour, and they've been crammed into this room that was originally designed for a completely different purpose, but this is where they're serving their confinement. I want to contrast this image with this one. And this, of course, I'm not sure if people will recognise this immediately. This, of course, is a photograph from the so-called Beer Summit. And the Beer Summit was occasioned by the arrest by Sergeant Crowley, who is the gentleman seated just next to the president, who's got his head to the camera. And Sergeant Crowley arrested a Harvard professor, Skip Gates, who's the head of the African American Studies program at Harvard. And Skip had returned from an overseas trip, and he was trying to get into his house in Cambridge, and he wasn't able to get in through the door. The door had jammed, and so he pushed his way in. A neighbour had seen Skip enter his house in this fashion and called the police. And Sergeant Crowley showed up and arrested him, and Skip protested, "But this is my house, and you can't arrest me. You can't arrest me here." It became a national news story, and the president promised us that he would use this the arrest of Skip Gates in his home, he would use this as a teachable moment about race and criminal justice in the United States. And I don't think we really got that moment. I think we got this photo opportunity, and instead of getting this image, we got this one. And so part of what I want to do this evening is recalibrate the discussion a little bit and move away from this particular photo opportunity to try and document the real facts about what the American criminal justice system has become. Okay, mass imprisonment. So NYU sociologist David Garland coins this term mass imprisonment. What is it? It's two things. Mass imprisonment is two things. Garland says, mass imprisonment is a rate of imprisonment that's markedly above the historical and comparative norm for societies of this type. And he's talking about affluent liberal democracies. So that sounds straightforward, right? We could identify societies that have a comparatively high level of incarceration, a historically high level of incarceration. But then he goes on to say it's also something else. Imprisonment, under the conditions of mass imprisonment, imprisonment ceases to be the incarceration of individual offenders and becomes the systematic imprisonment of whole groups of the population. So for me as a sociologist, this was simultaneously intriguing and slippery, right? I liked the idea that there was some collective significance for the scale of incarceration. But it was slippery because at what level are we no longer incarcerating the individual, but incarcerating the group? And this was sort of the puzzle I was trying to resolve in my work. I was trying to figure out at what point are we no longer locking up individuals, but we are in some sense, which is what we have to figure out, we are in some sense incarcerating the group. Okay, here's some empirical context. We measure the size of a penal system with an incarceration rate. And this is just the proportion of people in the population on an average day who are behind bars. And if we look at the Western European countries, so on the slide here we've got the United Kingdom, Germany, the Netherlands, Italy, Austria, and so on. If we look at the Western European countries, the incarceration rate in all these countries is about 100 per 100,000, 50 to 100 per 100,000. And we can compare these countries, so that's about 0.1% of the population are behind bars. And we can compare incarceration in Western Europe to the US. And so the American incarceration rate is an order of magnitude larger than Western Europe. It's extremely unusual compared to Western Europe. And I think we often lose sight of just how unusual the US is in this respect. Now, we've also got very good historical data, and we can look at the size of the prison system back to the 1920s. So let me show you now some historical data. And if we look at prison incarceration rates, the proportion of the population in prison. If we go back to 1925 and move forward 50 years, 1925 to the early 70s, the incarceration rate in the United States was about what it currently is in Europe, about 100 per 100,000. But then in the early 1970s, the system began to change, and it began to change continuously for the next 30, 40 years. We're still living through it. And so that's what happened to imprisonment rates in the United States over the last 35 years. We're at the tail end of a 3 decades long period of continuous growth. What do these numbers mean? We've got about now 1.5 million people in prison. These are people serving at least 12 months, about 28 months at the median for a felony conviction. We've got another 780,000 people in county jails, and these are people serving shorter sentences, less than 12 months, or awaiting trial, typically. We've got another 800,000 people who are under supervision in the community on parole, who have served custodial sentences, and now they've gone back into the community and are reporting to a parole officer. And then on top of that, we have another 4.2 million people on probation. And by and large, these are people who are under community supervision, under the community supervision of a probation officer who are serving suspended sentences. And so altogether now, we have about over 7 million people in the United States that are under some sort of criminal justice supervision. This scale of supervision is historically entirely new, right? So the period that we're at right now is entirely new, and it's really been with us for about a decade now. Now, as striking as these figures are, this is not what's most important about the criminal justice system in America today. The most important thing about the criminal justice system in America today is its unequal distribution across the population. So let's have a look at that empirically and see the extent of that inequality. So we're going to look at two years here. 1980, which was fairly early in the period of this process of prison growth, and 2008. And the two bars on the figure there show the figures I've just been showing you. Incarceration rate, prison and jail incarceration rate in the United States by 2008 was about 750 per 100,000, just under 1% of the population were locked up on an average day in 2008. It's about the same now, a little bit higher. But what if we just looked at men? And what if we just looked at men who were under age 35? And what if we just looked at men under age 35 with less than 12 years of schooling, men who had dropped out of high school? We see then, if we focus on that group, here we're looking at white men under 35 years old, dropped out of high school, their incarceration rate is not 750 per 100,000, it's 11,000 per 100,000, so 11,950. So nearly 12% of all white male high school dropouts under 35 on an average day are under lock and key, either in county jail or state or federal prison. Now, of course, the most profound disparity in the criminal justice system is the racial disparity. So let's see some figures for African Americans. What's this telling us? This is telling us that among African American men who are under age 35, if they dropped out of high school, by 2008, the chances that they'll be in prison is about 37%. 37% of all black male high school dropouts under 35 are locked up right now. When we were first doing the work that estimated these numbers, we were sure they had to be wrong. And we checked and rechecked and rechecked. And this was now 10 years ago when we first started doing this work. And I still find this just an extraordinary number. And I think one that's not widely known in our public conversation about the scale of criminal punishment in America. Now, everything I've shown you so far is a snapshot, right? It's just a snapshot at a point in time. How many people are locked up on a given day? Another way to think about this is to ask, well, what's the likelihood that someone's ever going to serve time in prison at some point in their lives? And we might be interested in that kind of a statistic because we think that serving time in prison confers an enduring disadvantage that affects a whole array of life chances even after someone's been released, right? And so we're interested in what's the size of the group who are at risk of these adverse outcomes that can flow from imprisonment. So then we did a different kind of project in which we were comparing two birth cohorts. First, we were looking at a group of people born just after World War II, so born in the late 1940s. And if you're born in the late 1940s, you're reaching your mid-30s in the late 1970s. So let's have a look at some figures on that post-World War II birth cohort. So these are men born in the late 1940s. They're reaching their mid-30s by 1979. For non-college African Americans, this is men who have never been to college. They may have completed high school, they may have dropped out. About 1 in 8, if they were in this birth cohort born just after World War II, about 1 in 8, 12% are going to go to prison, have been to prison at some point in their lives. If they dropped out of high school, we estimate that the number's about 15% will go to prison at some point in their lives. Let's compare these men to a group of people that were born in the late 1970s, and they're reaching their mid-30s right now, okay? And so they're growing up through the prison boom. For non-college African-American men, and that's about half of all African-American men, for non-college African-American men, about a third are going to serve time in state or federal prison. That's 28 months of incarceration at the median for a felony conviction. About a third are going to go to prison at some point in their lives. If they dropped out of high school, nearly 70% are going to go to prison at some point in their lives. So for that group of very low education young men, prison time has become entirely normal, right? It's become a normal part of the passageway through adulthood. And this is new. We need only go back 30 years to this post-war birth cohort born just after World War II to find a time when the penal system was not a ubiquitous presence in the lives of African-American men with low levels of schooling. Okay. In the sociology of the life course, we think about all of the different events that mark the pathway through adulthood. And the idea is, in the sociology of the life course, is that if you can hit these different events and in sequence, that's associated with a whole variety of positive outcomes in later life. What are these life events that we normally think about? Well, completing schooling, serving in the military has been something people have focused on, getting married. In this context of extremely high incarceration rates, we have to also think, I think, about the prison as a life event that marks the passageway through adulthood, at least for recent birth cohorts of African American men. I'll show you some figures on this very, very quickly. Here we're looking at how many people by their mid-30s, black and white men, how many of black and white men by their mid-30s have been married, have completed a 4-year degree, completed a bachelor's degree, have served in the military. If we compare imprisonment to these different life events, we can see that serving time in prison for African American men is about 3 times as common as military service. It's much more common than completing a bachelor's degree. So African American men now are more likely to have been to prison than have completed a 4-year degree. The other thing to note from a table like this is the disparity. If we just look at the ratio, 27% to 5%, 27% for blacks compared to 5% for whites in the likelihood of imprisonment. This is a much larger disparity than just about all other social indicators. So much larger than the racial disparity in marriage rates, educational attainment, military service. We could multiply the examples actually and look at wages, employment, wealth, child mortality. Nothing distinguishes the experience of blacks and whites in American society like contact with the criminal justice system. And this is a very large disparity that overshadows most other social indicators. All right, so that's half my talk. That's half the story. And the question now, I think, is, well, so what, right? What is the significance of these statistics? And I want to argue this evening that this has really profound implications for how we think about racial and class inequalities in American society today. And I want to argue to you that the inequalities that are produced by this very high rate of incarceration are very profound and very enduring. And they're very enduring for 3 reasons. The inequality created by these very high rates of incarceration are invisible, they're cumulative, and they're intergenerational. I'm going to talk a little bit about each of those 3 ideas now. The inequality created by incarceration are invisible, cumulative, and intergenerational. Invisible inequality, what does that mean? The inequalities created by incarceration are really hard to observe, and it's hard to think about the penal system as a source of social or economic inequality. And why is that so? Because incarceration is so concentrated in a very small segment of the population, the penal system does not form any part at all of the reality of the mainstream of American society. It's not something many of us ever have to worry about or think about. The institutions themselves are segregative, right? Obviously. They pull people out of society and put them in a custodial facility, often in far-flung places, away from the urban centres in which people predominantly live. So this is a population very much hidden from the view of the mainstream of society. For sociology, this is very important because it means that incarceration is often overlooked in social accounting, the way in which we count the economic status of the population. And as a result of this, the level of inequality we observe tends to be underestimated, right? Because there's this large hidden population with very low socioeconomic status, we tend simply not to see it. So let me give you a very simple empirical illustration of this idea. Okay, employment rates. This is how we measure employment in the population. We're looking at African American men who have dropped out of high school. These are men under age 35. This is a statistic called the employment to population ratio. The employment to population ratio. What's the fraction of the population that have a job? And the census regularly calculates statistics like this to measure employment. And they use, for the measurement of these employment rates, a household survey called the Current Population Survey, and it's used to measure the monthly unemployment rate. The big problem, of course, with the Current Population Survey, this household survey, is that it only surveys households. And what if you don't live in a household? What if you live in an institutional setting? then you're not counted in the population, and you don't form part of the census assessment of the economic well-being of the population. So our big innovation here was simply to count prison and jail inmates as part of the population. Okay, we're trying to estimate the employment to population ratio. We should count the entire population. So what is the trend in employment, which doesn't look great anyway if we only focus on the non-institutional population? What does the trend in employment look like if we also count the institutional population? This is what the true trend in employment for low-skill African American men looks like. We can see that there's been a very substantial decline, right? A very substantial decline in employment. The entire gap between these two series is due to the scale of the prison and jail population. That's what the gap is due to. We can see that through the 1990s, which was a period in which the labour market became very tight, and it was thought that the economy was growing so fast that it was providing jobs for very marginal workers that had been very difficult to reach with social policy. And if we look at black men who have dropped out of high school under 35, we can see that through the 1990s, their employment rates fell, in fact. And the decline in employment was driven by the growth in incarceration rates. Any appearance of the improvement in the employment situation of low-skill African American men through the 90s is entirely an artefact of the growth of the penal system. Okay? So that's invisible inequality. Cumulative inequality. What do we mean by cumulative inequality? The inequality created by incarceration diminishes the economic status of those whose employment and wage rates are already extremely low. The people in prison and jail have extremely poor employment opportunities, have extremely poor employment records prior to incarceration. As bad as their economic opportunities were before they entered prison, we find that prison makes things worse. If we look at wage rates and employment rates after prison, they're lower than before. How much lower? Survey estimates say that imprisonment reduces earnings by about 40%. So if you were making $20,000 before you went to prison, then you're making about $12,000 after you come out. We conducted an experiment in New York City where we sent job seekers to apply for entry-level jobs throughout the 5 boroughs. We sent people out to apply for jobs over a period of a year. They applied for about 1,500 jobs. And these were trained testers, and they randomly presented evidence to employers of a criminal record, and we would send them out in pairs. And so one tester had a clean resume with no evidence of a criminal record. The other tester had on their resume evidence of a criminal record. They listed a parole officer as a reference, which happens in real life, and they also listed some employment history in a correctional facility. We made our testers dress alike, speak alike, answer job interview questions similarly. The only difference between them is that one would check the box saying, yes, I have a prior criminal conviction. We found that reporting to an employer that you had a criminal conviction reduced your chances of a positive response by the employer from by about a third to a half. Okay, so this was a very significant economic penalty in the job market. We also found that the economic penalty of a criminal conviction in our experiment was larger for African American job seekers than for white job seekers. Here's some descriptive data to give you a sense of the earnings mobility of people. Earnings mobility is unbelievably important. What is earnings mobility? Earnings mobility is the way in which earnings tends to grow with age. And 2/3 of your lifetime earnings growth, 2/3 of the total growth in your earnings over your lifetime happens by about age 40. And it's a very, very regular pattern. Earnings are very stratified by age. As you get older, your earnings go up as you acquire experience, in your job. It's unbelievably socially important because earnings growth allows men to age into a whole variety of pro-social roles as a breadwinner, as a provider for a family, as an attractive partner in the marriage market. Earnings growth is a fundamental mechanism by which men become integrated into the rest of civilized society. For people who are incarcerated, there is very little earnings growth. So here we're showing earnings mobility over a 20-year period for people who've never been incarcerated. If they score low on a cognitive test, if they've dropped out of high school. For low-income men, what this slide is showing, for low-income men, there's very little upward mobility out of the low-income group. Okay, earnings do not grow on average for those that have been incarcerated, and this creates enormous obstacles in playing a positive role in their families and communities. Okay, last bit, intergenerational inequality. Large prison populations means large numbers of children with parents in prison. There's a very active area of research now where there's a lot of work being done trying to understand the effects of the incarceration of parents on kids. In our labour market studies, we often think of the economic penalty of incarceration as being associated with the stigma of a criminal record. We're increasingly finding that the stigma of a criminal record can also affect families and children, and the children of incarcerated parents also bear some stigma. And there's new research now providing evidence of diminished school achievement, behavioural problems, depressive symptoms among the children of incarcerated parents. Interestingly, there are suggestions in this research that these effects are particularly large for boys rather than girls. Let me provide a very simple empirical illustration of this intergenerational inequality. So here's another one of my time series, and here we're just counting the number of kids with a parent in prison or jail. And if we look at Latino kids, by 2008, about 600,000 Latino kids had a parent in prison or jail. If we look at white kids, about 700,000 by 2008 had a parent in prison or jail. And if we look at African American kids, over a million African American kids now have a parent who is incarcerated. So this is about 11% of all black kids have an incarcerated parent. If we take a birth cohort of kids born in 1990, about a quarter of those kids will see their father sent to prison by the time they reach their 14th birthday. Okay, so the experience of incarceration is obviously pervasive for recent birth cohorts of African American men with low levels of education. It's also pervasive for the children of those men. Okay, let's go back to our original idea of mass incarceration. What is the significance of all of this for mass incarceration? You'll remember mass incarceration was two things: a rate of incarceration that was markedly above the historical and comparative norm for liberal democratic societies. We've seen evidence of that where in a historically novel point in the history of this country in which we've got these extraordinary incarceration rates higher than anywhere else on the planet. But there was this other part, right, where David Garland was saying mass incarceration involves not just the imprisonment of the individual, but the imprisonment of the group. And we're trying to figure out, well, what does that mean? What does the imprisonment of the group mean? And so this is my reformulation. When incarceration rates are so very high and so concentrated in a very small segment of the population, and incarceration has large and enduring effects on social and economic inequality. Why are the effects large and enduring? Because they're invisible, cumulative, and intergenerational, right? So when incarceration has large and enduring effects on inequality, what is mass incarceration? It's the production of a new social group in American society. It's a production of a social group that is basically cut off from the mainstream opportunities that the rest of the society enjoys. It's a contraction of citizenship, if you like. It's a contraction of full membership in society. And I think that's the sense in which we can think about the incarceration of the group rather than the individual. So, where do we go from here? I think we're living right now, for the first time in decades and decades, in a reform moment. The states are broke. The states are broke, and they're looking to cut correctional budgets. They're looking to cut all budgets, actually. But they want to cut correctional spending. It's crowding out spending on other things that voters care about: higher education, Medicaid. So for the first time in a very long time, there's political will for retrenching mass incarceration, for political will for reversing this tremendous expansion in the American penal system. But I think we've got to ask ourselves, what's the problem that we really want to solve here? What is the problem? Is the problem very high rates of incarceration? Is that the problem we're trying to solve? I think the answer is no. Ultimately, that's not the problem we're trying to solve. Ultimately, the problem that we're trying to solve is the social costs of very high rates of unemployment, chronic joblessness, untreated addiction, untreated mental health problems, housing insecurity, economic insecurity, that have come to be concentrated among whom? A group in the American population for which there is no social safety net. And this is young men with very low levels of schooling, right? And the penal system grew in response to these social problems. And the implication, I think, is if we think about reform, if we think about retreating from mass incarceration only in criminal justice terms, and I think that's where the debate is right now, actually. It's largely a discussion within criminal justice policy experts. If we think about reform only in criminal justice terms, the reforms by themselves are going to be insufficient because they're not going to address these problems of unemployment, untreated addiction, untreated mental health problems, housing insecurity, economic insecurity, more generally. So that's the challenge, I think, is to have a much broader discussion about what this reform moment should be about. So let me conclude with a plan. This is my proposal. This is, I think, a first step. This would be a first step that tries to meet this challenge of this broader discussion. And this comes from a Brookings Institution paper I wrote a year or so ago. Okay, what about this? Let's give a transitional job to everyone coming out of prison who needs a job. Now, not everyone coming out of prison needs a job because they already have employment lined up. But employment problems are substantial, to say the least, among people coming out of prison. And I reckon we would need 200,000 jobs. That's the employment shortfall for people coming out of prison. So let's give them all a job for a year. What are the other big deficits that we need to address? There's a massive treatment gap right now. There needs to be a larger commitment to substance abuse treatment after release from prison. Tremendous housing insecurity, and through supportive housing, the problems of the substance abuse treatment gap and housing insecurity can be met together. As we've seen in the statistics too, this is an incredibly unskilled population. The average level of schooling of people in state prison is about 10 years. 10 years of schooling on average. On average, state prisoners are high school dropouts. And so there's a massive education gap that needs to be filled. And I think we actually have good models of what a good system of correctional education would look like. And the Federal Bureau of Prisons mandates educational programming for everyone with less than a high school diploma. And I think that's a model that should be adopted by the states. There is one criminal justice reform that's really important. I think there's a lot of evaluation evidence showing this now. Some states are having a great deal of success significantly curtailing re-imprisonment for technical parole violators. For a lot of states, the big growth in state prison populations was due to the revocation of parolees, and limiting re-imprisonment, in particular for technical violators, can really curb the growth of prison populations. And there's a lot of evidence showing now that this can be done very, very safely if the right alternative set of sanctions and supports are in place. The whole philosophy of a plan like this is that supervision shifts from the prison to the community. And the supervision that's being provided is no longer criminal justice supervision, but it's an intensive type of social support that's geared to employment, housing, and good health. And the whole objective here is to try and build a structure in which people have a great deal of stability and predictability in their lives. And that's the underlying philosophy. Is this a pie in the sky? Is this a pie in the sky liberal fantasy? That was a question I actually received in one talk. Is this a pie in the sky liberal fantasy? Well, I can say this. There are elements of this plan operating with enormous success throughout the country. Each component of this plan has been evaluated very positively in some program operating in a state or locality around the country. So this is trying to synthesise what I see as really the best practice. How much does it cost? It costs $8.5 billion. And is that a lot of money? Everything's a lot of money at the moment, right? The Congress will not spend, this Congress anyway, will not spend an extra cent right now. When I first wrote this, when I was first sort of putting this together, this was just after the TARP bailout and the stimulus package, and so Congress had just signed off on about $1.5 trillion worth of support to the financial industry and for economic stimulus. And I thought, $8.5 billion, that's a bargain. Times have changed. But I will say this, on a cost-benefit basis, based on the evaluation literature that we'll have, this costs $8.5 billion, but it delivers $10 billion in benefits, both in reduced offending and reduced correctional costs. So the system would pay for itself. How big is the system now? Nationally, we spend about $60 billion, $60 or $70 billion on corrections. And so we would be talking about 10% of the entire correctional budget of the whole country. So this is one blueprint for moving forward. I offer it to this room as a provocation for discussion. I'm very much looking forward to our question and answer period. I'm very much looking forward to our panelists. So let me close there and thank you once again for the opportunity to speak this evening.
So at this point, we're going to move to the question and answer forum. And I'm going to ask each panelist to introduce themselves and be brief. Simply say their name, their position at whatever organization they're at, and then I'm going to ask them to briefly describe why they have become involved in these issues, why these issues matter to them. Hopefully we can keep it around a minute. So I really urge you to use the programs to learn more about our panelists. And then after that, we're going to move to the question and answer. And you can see there's a microphone here and a microphone on the other side. And once we get to that section, if you can line up and ask questions, and I'll describe that a little bit later. So now we're going to move to our panelists. We'll start from this side. Yeah.
I'm Eileen Farley. I'm the director at Northwest Defenders Association, one of 4 King County public defender agencies. And my interest, having been doing criminal defense work for 30 years, is simply because the people who are discussed here tonight are our clients. The particular issues that Professor Western highlighted were highlighted again for me by a May 2011 Wall Street Journal article, which identified private prison stocks as a good buy and a strong growth industry for the future. Between 2000 and 2010, the Corrections Corporation of America generated $1.5 billion in free cash after paying its shareholders dividends, making capital purchases, and providing maintenance on its facilities. That amount of money is going to be fought for by these corporations in the face of any effort to implement Professor Western's wonderful program. But I think it is a discussion that we have to have and that we have to fight for. Thank you so much for coming out on this evening to look at graphs, which I found fascinating, though I was initially terrified that there was going to be a lot more numbers.
My name is Kimberly Gordon, and I am a criminal defense attorney. I was a public defender for a long time before going into private practice. And I want to echo what Eileen said about these are our clients, but these are also what I have come to know is these are our family members, these are our community members, these are people that children that go to our sons and daughters' schools. These are their parents. This is the community, the neighborhoods that we grow up in, and it's affecting us all. I'm also here tonight because I want to talk about one small thing that you can go do right now to begin to work on the plan that he has presented to us. And there's information sheets that I've handed out about Senate Bill 5019, House Bill 1235. And when you look at the charts, the graphs that he's presented, I mean, what this is targeting is people that don't even make it onto those charts, because these are the people that were arrested but weren't even convicted. And in Washington, that's 50% of misdemeanors and 25% of felonies. All those cases, they're not convicted. And they're still denied housing, employment, all of the effects that you're seeing here, and this is a way to mitigate those damages. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to talk to you afterwards, and thank you.
Hello, I'm Dolphy Jordan. I am the volunteer coordinator for the post-prison education program. And there are a lot of issues I could talk about, but in the context of the topic tonight of inequality, I have to make a personal comparison. In 1989, I was arrested and convicted for murder. In 1989, Troy Davis was also arrested and convicted for murder. Today, I'm reuniting with my family, pursuing a college education, and working for an organization that allows me to give back to our communities. We were both teenagers. I was white, he was black. Now I have to wonder, sitting here today, if I'd be here if I was black. There needs to be alternatives to mass incarceration.
I'm Jenna Melman. I'm the Director of Applicant and Student Affairs with the Post-Prison Education Program. And I wanted to highlight the education piece of the reentry plan. Education has been proven a successful tool to help prisoners reenter society. And a meta-analysis published in 2004 shows that with just 2 years of a college education, you can reduce the likelihood that men and women will return to prison from 60% to 10%. And that in all studies looking at education and recidivism, there shows at least some reduction in the rate of people going back. At the Post-Prison Education Program, we help people get into college or VOTEC and pursue a degree or certificate. And our rate of recidivism is less than 2%. So I think that as a community, we need to find ways to provide opportunities that people may have never had before to find an education and be successful.
Hi, I'm Cheryl Strange. I'm the Vice President of Behavioral Health for Pioneer Human Services, an organization here based out of Seattle, but statewide with regard to housing, treatment for mental health and chemical dependency issues, and jobs for individuals involved in the criminal justice system. I'm here, I think it's important to shed some light on the results of mass incarceration with regard to health status and healthcare expenditures of incarcerated and post-incarcerated individuals. This is certainly true in the context of those with serious and persistent mental illness, as well as those convicted of drug-related crimes, but it is certainly not limited to treatment for this or lack of treatment. We need to consider chronic lack of access to health care and the effects of this on an individual's overall health status. A person age 55 who has been incarcerated has a health profile of an individual of non-incarcerated individual, a health profile of an 80-year-old. So we're talking about chronic disease, heart disease, renal disease, diabetes, hypertension, and very serious dental issues. So everything you heard Professor Western present with regard to invisibility, intergenerational issues, inequality, can be equally applied to the injustice of the lack of health care access for folks that have been incarcerated. So we know that access to health care is cheaper and better in the long run than lack of access to health care. And I too am grateful that we're here and am available after the panel to answer any questions or dialogue about that.
Good evening. My name is David Lujano, and I'm also a volunteer for our post-prison education program, and also was convicted for a murder case back in '97, and I did almost 15 years in prison. I was born in LA, and they took me back to Mexico when I was a kid, and the environment that I was growing up at, it wasn't too good. I ended up getting caught up in gangs and, you know, all that. You know, the statistics shows the dropout school that never went to school. I did my time, and through my time, it wasn't so many programs in the DOC department to better yourself. And I guess I'm here today to be an example that, you know, it is possible, maybe not for the ones out here, but for the ones that are still in there, that, you know, if you give yourself a chance, and people like post-prison education program and other people that can give you a chance to better yourself, there is possible. You know, I agree with the statistics. I was there with people, at first it was just a handful of us as far as being Mexicans, and within like 8-9 years, I mean, it went from hundreds to the thousands, and it's just crazy to see that. And I'm just here tonight to be an example, and then there is a possibility to change. And I'm just thankful to be here.
Hi, my name is Maggie Wilkins, and I'm State Field Coordinator for the League of Education Voters, and we are a statewide advocacy organization that works on public school policy. And I would like to talk about the school discipline policies here in our state that mirror and reflect the trend of mass incarceration. Here in Seattle in particular, we see that in the high school area, 5%, African American students are 5 times as likely as white students to be suspended. It's even more alarming in elementary school. You're 11 times, if you're a black student, you're 11 times more likely to be suspended than a white student. And I only wish that we had as good a data as we just saw on the screen, but unfortunately, Washington as a state doesn't collect this data holistically. We just know it to be true based on national trends, and so our organization is leading a campaign to ask our state to collect this data more thoroughly and to reconsider zero tolerance policies.
Hi, my name is Alexis Harris. I'm a professor of sociology at the University of Washington. And the reason why I'm here is just to sort of highlight the importance of education, both formal education at the high school level, college level, graduate level. It's sort of being the equalizer and giving people opportunities, as Professor Western has talked about. But also the importance of education, like panels like this one tonight, is hearing these statistics, although we become overwhelmed, but sort of listening to that and remembering that this is being done in our name, and that we have a voice as concerned citizens, as now educated citizens, to do something about it, because if we don't, then again, we're complicit in this process.
Good evening. My name is Johannes Wielden. I'm doing a postdoc at Washington State University, and I also teach at the Coyote Ridge Correctional Center as part of an Associate of Arts program there. I guess I just want to say, you know, we live in a disposable society. We throw away food, we throw away cheap electronic goods, and we throw away people. We trap them in a mistake, and we punish them day after day, year after year, based on a notion that punishment works. What I see in the classroom is the potential for education to help the guys that I have gotten a chance to meet and work with, for them to build a self, to understand their history, understand themselves, and begin to plan for the future. So thanks for the opportunity.
I'm Doug Merlino. I'm a journalist. Through my work, I've written on race and class in Seattle, and it's brought me into the lives of some people who are in this system of coming in and out of prison, getting to know their families, getting to know them really well. And I mean, I think Professor Western, you know, his book is brilliant. You know, it's deep, and really when you get into it, it can be very depressing and overwhelming. You know, there is a normalization of prison, and you know, there's economic issues and all types of stuff going on. And I think getting to know those people brought me, I want to put in a pitch for R.A. Cohn and the Post-Prison Education Project, because you start looking for things that can be done concretely. And I know, I'm sure R.A. would say that this is just around the edges, but you see that getting people, helping them with education, giving them support, you see lives change, and you see that, you know, what an incredible waste it is to lock up, you know, 2.3 million people. And then you see the human cost to families, to children, to communities, to the city. And I mean, I just think, you know, when you think about going from 500,000 people in prison in 1980 to about 2.3 million today, you know, I think we always look back, you know, we like to look back at things in the past, in the 50s and 60s, and think, oh, how could Jim Crow happen, or how could this happen? And I think, you know, sometimes it's fine to do that, but I also think, you know, right now, people 50 or 60 years from now will look back at us and think, what were they doing, what were they thinking? So I think that this is something that we should all, you know, look at and be aware of, and, you know, look at programs that are actually working and helping people.
My name is Lisa Dugard. I am with the Defender Association Racial Disparity Project. What I want to say tonight is, while it is completely right that we need a humane exit plan for people who are currently trapped in the system, we will still be trapped on a giant hamster wheel if we don't stop putting people into that system. I want to comment about or just offer a little bit of insight about the thought process that very often leads to many of those admissions into the system. This is an excerpt from a police report from Federal Way in July of this year. I'm just going to read you a bit of it. Officer W was conducting a foot patrol at the Kent Transit Center, a known area where gang members have congregated in the past. Officer W observed an unknown black male, BH, walking through the transit center wearing a heavy black coat and a gray knit cap. Officer W knows from his training and experience that subjects that are illegally carrying a firearm like to wear heavy coats and loose clothing to conceal the firearm. Officer W observed the large left front pocket of BH's coat to be sagging, as if a heavy object was inside the pocket. Officer W observed the outline of an object that was approximately 6 inches long and laying in the bottom of the pocket parallel to the ground. Okay, at this point, you may have questions about what's going on in this investigation, but that's not really why I'm sharing it with you. This is why. BH walked to a group of approximately 5 other males who jaywalked across the street. BH was the only person in the group not to jaywalk. BH walked approximately 75 yards to a crosswalk, crossed the street, and rejoined the group that had illegally crossed the street. Officer W knows from his training and experience, wait for it, that subjects concealing weapons or contraband will avoid committing infractions in front of police to avoid contact with the police and possible discovery of what they are concealing. So BH got busted that night for crossing a street legally, and this is to make you angry.
My name is Larry Gossett, and currently I serve as the chair of the King County Council here in Martin Luther King Jr. County, and I'd like to begin by thanking R.A. Cohn and his program for sponsoring this very enlightening and educational and hopefully inspirational event this evening, and inviting Bruce Western to speak to us. I want to just reinforce what Lisa Dugard has said about what's happening here locally, because I think that makes everything our speaker said relevant. King County is the government that operates the Criminal Justice Center here in our community. Bruce mentioned that about 800,000 men and women in this country are in county jails on a daily population. Here in King County, we have 2,052 men and women who have been in jail every day this year. Of that number, In a county that's 5.4% black, on each of those days this year, at least 40% of those in the King County Jail have been African Americans. Of those who go to state prison for drugs, it's over 60%, but nearly half of everybody that goes to prison from this county are low-income African Americans, all poor, and the second fastest growing population of folks who are going to state prison in King County are African American women now, and it's a great challenge. I'd just like to conclude by having all of you think about what it is we can do in our local community to change this situation, because through mass organizing, we can eliminate mass incarceration, but that's the only way it's going to be done, because most politicians are not going to voluntarily say that I want to reduce the criminal budgets and use it to help enhance the living condition of poor and oppressed people. One final example, Bruce mentioned number 3 on his National Prison Reentry Plan, that we should have no more re-imprisonment of technical parole violators in this country. That's a very relevant point, because most of them, right now we have a state contract with the Washington State Department of Corrections, where we keep 438 men and women in the King County Jail every day for state violations, and most of them are for very minor, not having enough money to come from federal aid to downtown Seattle to see their probation officer. The state picks them up and put them in the King County Jail. If we had mass organizing to deal with mass incarceration, we could radically reduce that figure in Washington State as it relates to our county in less than a year. We just have to have the will to do it, y'all. Let's do something about what's happening. Thank you.
La mano dura no funciona. Being tough on crime is not enough. We must be smart on crime. My name is Leno Rosavila. I'm the executive director of a new organization called Community Health and Safety Committee, and we have a table downstairs and ask you to get involved with us as we organize the voice of Latinos to speak out about the injustices within the so-called judicial system. I have to tell you that every time that we talk about incarcerating people, it is done on fear. A fear of terrorists, a fear of blacks, a fear of Latinos, a fear of immigrants. And you know, we have this great program that we've spent billions of dollars with called the War on Drugs. And it's really been the war on people of color and people who are poor. And we are incarcerating people every day in the state of Washington for simply smoking a joint. And that's not a reason to incarcerate people. And we have a chance. Oh man, that was good. We have a chance to change that this year because there's a petition by New Approach to legalize marijuana, and it's something that should have happened a long time ago. We have petitions in the back there. I gotta tell you that, you know, our friend was talking about, you know, about gang members being innocently charged, and we have a friend of ours, James Lopez, who we're working on the case of, who's innocently charged of being involved in the Kent gang shooting, and he was not part of it, and we're going to get him free and we're going to prove him innocent, but it's going to cost us a lot of money and community effort, and you can help Community Health Services Committee do that. The other thing I got to tell you is that we should not listen to our politicians and the fear that they place on us. And one of the biggest fears that they've used to incarcerate people of color, and in particular immigrants, is 9/11 and the creation of Homeland Security. You know, now, and what you got to see, and we all respond like sheeps to it because we're worried about terrorists coming from Mexico. Terrorists came from Mexico. Second, but we're incarcerating more people in the federal prison who are immigrants than any other group right now. The other thing is they have us taking our shoes off. Now that the underwear bomber has pleaded guilty, expect to take your underwear off. You know, the other day it makes me mad because it's all based on fear, and the prisons like TSA is all a profit-based industry. So the other day when they were doing the pat down, and I have a metal in my knees, and they were doing the invasive stuff, the guy says, I'm going to pat you down in the groin area with the back of my hands. And I said, do you mind if I hold on to you if I get excited? That's how stupid this stuff is. We must put a stop to stupidity on drugs, stupidity on incarceration, and place our efforts and issues and strength and our future in the humanity of each of us.
All right, so thank you again, everybody, for being here and for sharing with us. So now we're getting to the public question and answer period. So there's a microphone here, microphone over there. If you have questions, please form a line here. And we're going to lay some ground rules. So first of all, it has to be a question. And this is just out of respect for everybody else in the audience. We're trying to really keep it short, so please ask one question. And this is also out of respect for the panelists, and it's out of respect for Seattle Town Hall that have so graciously accepted to host our event here. So please ask one question, keep it brief, and you can direct this question to a specific person on the panel, or you can just throw it out and they can pick it up. Any questions about the rules? Okay, great. So, the lineup?
They can't see what they don't know.
They can't see it? Okay. I'm sorry. Okay. I didn't understand your... Okay. So, all right. So you all got the idea. We're going to do one, well, my right, your left, and then one from this side. Okay? So, go ahead.
Thank you. This is a follow-up for Bruce Western and also for the other panelists. If you could elaborate, please, on the penal system. You said it grew out of a number of problems. Could we go back to the 70s and talk about those problems and how, you know, what precipitated this huge expansion?
Sure. So very quickly, and I didn't talk very much at all about the growth of the penal system. Very quickly, I think the causes of the increase in imprisonment rates are really two. One's political and one's economic. On the economic side, what we saw in American cities through the 1960s and 1970s was massive deindustrialization, massive job loss in urban manufacturing that basically pulled the rug out from underneath urban workers who had very low levels of schooling. This caused really substantial problems of high rates of unemployment, chronic joblessness, and a whole variety of social disorders that flowed from that. Young guys hanging out idle without a great deal of structure in their lives as a consequence of the economic changes in American cities. That was on the economic side. On the political side, what were the 60s? The 60s were a moment of great political ferment. A period of tremendous activism around the civil rights movement, the anti-war movement, and also the women's movement. In a reaction to this intense period of political activism, political leaders, ultimately from both parties, but initially chiefly from the Republican Party, began to move to the right on criminal justice issues. And the problem of order, law and order, and being tough on crime came to occupy national politics in a new way. And the politics of criminal justice became more punitive as part of the backlash, I think, to the political activism of the 60s. And these two forces ran headlong into each other. The employment crisis in American cities ran headlong into an increasingly punitive politics of criminal justice. And it was the combination of these two conditions, I think, that ultimately produced these extraordinary incarceration rates.
If I could just briefly add, you know, we went from the war on poverty to the war on crime to the war on drugs, and we're now living through an era of the war on science. And the question is, can we communicate what we know works in a way that can overcome the punitive ideology under which we're living? That's the question. I don't know the answer yet.
Hi, my question is directed to Dr. Western. You said in your kind of remedy, using the kind of community kind of policing with reentry, with a community that's ill, it seems to me that you're going to need financing and support to build the community first, to embrace people who are coming to re-enter into that community as well. So I would like to get your ideas on that. And plus, just on a side note, part of the dropout rate is that there are some remedial skills that they need to be educated as well to get them to the point that they're educated going through college and what have you. And how is that going to be helped out with the school system that has really failed them?
Yeah. I mean, this is a tremendously hard question you're raising, I think, and often in work on prison programming and post-prison programming, the whole model is motivated to correct deficiencies within the client. But of course, the client who's getting the substance abuse treatment or the education or the job training is returning to a community of tremendous social and economic adversity. And so how are they going to succeed in this context? And I think that's a major reason why it's very difficult to find successful programs, because people are returning to such conditions of adversity. And so I think the community itself needs to be part of any plan to retrench mass incarceration. The ultimate objective, the way I think about it, is a kind of strategy for public safety in which communities have to be enlisted, but it's public safety of a very thick kind in which people have order and regularity in their lives, and that means a whole variety of mainstream social institutions, families, schools, the labour market have to provide sources of social stability. The way I was thinking about this in the context of my re-entry plan is that support would be provided to local community actors so they could be enlisted in the process of social reintegration, and so they would also be, I think, a constituency for this sort of thick public safety.
Yeah, I like people, if they could talk about getting people out in the streets, like what's happening across the United States right now, with the urgency of what's going on and not relying on the same things that have been going on for a long time. And I've talked to two people on this panel, and probably a lot of you know, but the public doesn't know about the horrible conditions of prisoners, like in California, where they just had 2 hunger strikes just to get basic humane conditions. And in this country, most middle-class people do not understand the horrors of prison. They don't understand police brutality. And so I think the thing is, this is a tremendous thing that you're going to be on Channel 21. But in light of we have a black president and many people let Troy Davis die on death row, people are not, you know, they're sick and tired of relying on the systemic ways that they're supposed to deal with this. Can someone address the power of what I think is very important? We're having a protest in Westlake about police brutality and criminalization on the 22nd. Shameless plug here that I would like to know if people can address actually diverting people to where it's going to make a difference, standing up against this stuff. Thank you.
You know, when Eileen and I were actually talking about this book yesterday, and one of the things that we would want people to go out and do. And you are learning such valuable information tonight, information that doesn't get into the hands of our judges, our legislators, people that can make a difference. You can make a difference by educating them. Go to your city council meetings, go to your neighborhood meetings, tell people to read this book. But also, when you look at any stories in the news about crime in our communities, and you look at the responses, the comments are punitive. The comments don't recognize that these are us, not them, that are being accused of crimes. And so you can respond to that to get the dialogue going in all of these different forums.
I can just add one thing. I think it is, there are mass discussions going on about high levels of unemployment. I think Professor Western's point that that is not the real unemployment rate needs to be interjected into the conversation about the national economic crisis at every opportunity, because if it isn't, any solution that unfolds will provide, you know, job opportunities for people who are used to having job opportunities, but will leave unaddressed structural unemployment for the chronically unemployed and those whose criminal history is that barrier. I also think it is very important that people start talking openly and without a sense of stigma about their criminal history, since it is normalized, right? I mean, it's incredibly common to have criminal history. People need to start saying that that's part of my experience, that's why I'm not able to get a job, so that it stops being this hidden phenomenon and starts being in the center of the public discourse about the unemployment crisis.
I just have a really quick question, and I address it to anybody who's interested in answering it. But do you think that we're ever going to successfully address this problem and actually decrease the prison industrial complex without addressing the incentive, the broader social incentive to increase the prison industrial complex? And that is that the prison industrial complex is a private industry now. And corporations are making billions of dollars off the private industry of the prison industrial complex. It's also one of the biggest sources of cheap labor in this country. And private corporations like IBM, AT&T, Hewlett-Packard are going into prisons, and they're paying prisoners 20 cents an hour to do work that a normal average citizen out of prison could do for $14 or $20 an hour. And those prisoners are becoming an incredibly huge source of cheap labor. So do you think, and because the prisoners are getting paid 20 cents an hour, they're actually getting charged money for the services they use in prison. So when a prisoner has a candy bar, they're charged for it. And when prisoners come out of prison, they actually owe the prison industrial complex. I'll finish my sentence. So could you tell me, can we address this problem without addressing the fact that the prison industrial complex is a private industry?
Can I actually want to sort of piggyback on that just really quickly. And one thing that I do research on that I didn't talk about, and which a lot of people don't know about, are monetary sanctions. And I study them at the felony level, so anyone with a felony conviction knows what LFO stands for in Washington State, and that's a legal financial obligation. So on top of having this privatized industry, it's very a public industry as well, in that people are being charged for every single point of contact in the criminal justice system. So in Washington State, people are charged for their public defender. If they can't afford one, one will be appointed to them, but they'll be charged $450 a pop per felony conviction. Literally. Minimum, it's $600. You're charged $600 in Washington State for $500 victim crime penalty fee and a DNA fee of $100. There's a number of fees that range from, in King County, the minimum, the average is $600, and Clark, it's around $2,200, and that's per felony conviction. And then in Washington State, at the point of sentencing, you're charged 12% interest, and that accrues annually, plus an additional $100 collection fee. So on top of private industries making money, the state is now turning to the defendants, the people convicted of felonies, to pay for this whole process, including their incarceration themselves. So this is even a bigger issue if you think in terms of the collateral consequences that people talk about and the penalties for wages. There's a large amount of legal debt that keeps people trapped to the criminal justice system, and they're incarcerated for non-payment. Even if they're, I've seen people who are homeless who are incarcerated because they can't make payments in several counties in Washington State. So that's an addition. It's not answering any questions, but it's something else I want to put on your radar that's happening with the criminalization.
Well, just briefly, anybody who knows me knows I'm not a Pollyanna, but I think that Professor Western did start with perhaps the one good thing the recession has brought us, which is the corrections industry, and which is funded by tax dollars, is now just about the fourth largest expense nationally and in most states. And people are prepared to have a conversation about that cost. I toured the Portland Community Court a few years ago with somebody from the Downtown Seattle Association, which is not your, I don't know if any of them are here today, but it is not your liberal group. And their representative said, we recognize that we cannot jail our way out of these problems. That is a huge shift. It is an opening. It is a start to a conversation, but we have to have that conversation, and we have to bring all this information forward. Today, the City of Seattle opened the LEAD program, which is a law enforcement alternative diversion. It is an alternative for some offenders to jail before offenses happen. Ms. Dugard and Councilmember Gossett have been very instrumental in that. There are small steps, but they are steps, and you just have to keep rolling along, because otherwise, what's your option?
All right. Sure, applause. All right, so again, please just keep it to a question, please, just for time. Thank you. Go ahead.
My name is Chaim Elia. I have a college degree and a criminal history. My question had to do with something that Professor Western mentioned about invisibility, and it's kind of a critical one. My question is basically, to whom is this problem invisible? Because we've been talking about this for 40 years, starting with Angela Davis and then Michael Davis suggesting that we abolish the prison system entirely, and groups like Earth First and other parts of the anarchist movement. And so I would like to get more opinions than just Professor Western, but also I hope that we can address that this is not something that, oh my God, it's in the May issue, like it just came up. This has been going on for some time, and probably longer than the skyrocketing we talked about in the 1980s. So if you could speak to that.
Anyone?
Do you want me to respond or not?
Yeah, if nobody else will respond, please, somebody respond.
Yeah, I think I think you're absolutely right. I mean, there's a centuries-long discussion about how we punish and what does that say about us, the way in which we punish. I think, and you're right, that there has been a very strong and influential activist community and history of writing in the United States. It's that really is also part of this story. I think what's new about the current period is that criminal justice agencies are saturating the social life of poor communities like never before. That's new, and that's really emerged to this extent. This extraordinary rate of penal confinement. This is really just 10 years old, and I think that provides new challenges to our politics. This is an utterly radioactive issue in mainstream electoral politics, because partly we got here because of what elected officials perceive to be the benefits of being tough on crime. There was no percentage in being anything but tough on crime over the last 30 or 40 years. And those more critical voices, I think, have been completely marginalised from the mainstream discussion. Because the states are broke, I think a door is opening on the kind of political conversation that we can have now. And it's a very open question as to what this conversation is going to look like. But there's an opportunity for us now, and I think we should take it, and we should call on those older critical traditions. And I certainly see my work as trying to contribute in that respect.
I'd like to say a couple of things. One is that if we really want to address the judicial system, I think we first have to get a strong focus on race, because race plays such a big issue. And I want to also honor my brother Dolphy for bringing up Troy Davis, because it's clear Troy would be alive if he was white. And you know, in the South, and where we fought and where we had lynchings before they were legalized, and then once we eliminated lynchings as a law, they found another way to lynch blacks and Latinos and poor whites legally. So you know that the race of the victim on the death penalty, which is the end run of all of our penal system, is based on the race of the victim. So if you kill a white person in America and you happen to be black, you have a much greater chance of receiving the death penalty. And I think we really have to deal with the racism in America and the economics of America, because poor white people shouldn't go to jail. You can see that rich white people accused of the same thing as a poor white person or a black or Latino are not going to get that sentence. And I've worked on the death penalty long enough and searched hard and long, and I've yet to see a wealthy person receive the death penalty. Not that I want it for anybody, but I just want you to know that we're dealing with a very strong system of racism, and unless we begin to address that, we're not going to deal with our correctional system appropriately.
I'll just quickly respond. I don't see Secretary Warner from the Department of Corrections was here a little earlier. He may have moved around in the room, but you know, I want to just put a plug in for the state of Washington and the efforts that goes into our state. We are 48th in the nation for incarceration rates, and that is because of folks in this room, folks who are showing up. I think Washington, I won't say a lot, it speaks for itself, 48th in the nation for incarceration rates, which means it's almost to the bottom. So we need to keep doing what we're doing, and we need to recognize that transparency in prisons and volunteering in prisons and volunteering and working in the field, getting educated, studying is a very critical part. And I just want to remind folks in the great state of Washington and Seattle that, yeah, I think we have something to be proud of.
Thank you. Please.
Hello. Thanks for all being here. I'll try and make this quick. What is your opinion on the CSA, the war on drugs, and in particular, the Patriot Act, in relation to the dramatic increase to prison population and private penal profits as of this year, and if race is really a factor in all of this, and ultimately, where does the state of Washington stand?
Well, just on one aspect of, that's kind of a really big question. The Washington Defender Association, which is a statewide group of defender associations and contractors, sponsors an immigration project to help us when we have clients with immigration consequences. And what we have seen through that project is the merger in not just Washington, but across the country, of the Federal Department of Homeland Security into local jail systems in a way that was never true before. King County has paid a significant amount of money to send its arrest data to central location in DC, where the Department of Homeland Security mines it for potential immigration, people who might not be in the country with papers. I mean, it's a huge shift to think that every person who goes into a jail has their name and identifying information fed into a national database in DC. So in one sense, what we can be proud of is that in Washington there has been move away from this Secure Communities program, and that even the latest proponent of it, the mayor in Marysville, his city council said they weren't that keen to do it. And I think, again, that's part of a discussion that people can bring to this issue, which is that these federal programs have huge costs, huge consequences, and what exactly are we doing? What are we preventing? What exactly is this worth? And to even just raise that question, I think with your local elected officials who make the decisions on this, with your local elected sheriff, is a huge step to not let this just be a steamroller. So that's only a small part of your question, but that is something that you can do on a regular basis, and I encourage you to do it.
All right, so please go ahead.
Hello, my name is Yasmin, and first off, I'd like to say thank you to Maggie Wilkins for saying that about the people who are here and people who are doing stuff. So I'd like to address that. My question is for David. I have a very good friend who went through a similar experience that you went, and I was reading your experience here. I would like to know what you did. It says over here, while incarcerated, he was asked by prison administration to control and diffuse gang tensions inside prisons and create a safer environment for prisoners. So I would like you to know how you did that in prison. So.
I guess it was, it's kind of like a long story, but just to make it sure,
In specific reference to the Hispanic population being seen as like, the immigrant stigma that the Hispanic population has, so.
You know, like I mentioned earlier, when I first went in, it was 97, and when I went to Walla Walla, it was 98, and it was only a handful of us being Latino and Mexican, and by probably 2001, 2002, we went from hundreds to the thousands. Obviously, you know, the environment in prison is not going to be too pleasant, so there's always going to be problems and everything. Well, because I guess I was, by 2005 or 2006, I already done like 9 years, so I became to be like one of the oldest in the system. And for the system itself, I thought they thought that somehow we have some pull or some Jews or however you want to call it with other people in the population. This time I found myself in McNeil Island, and I was actually going to school taking graphic design, and I had a job up in industries, and pretty much I was doing all right. But then there was, I guess, a problem or an issue up in Monroe where they wanted to go from a closed custody facility to a medium, but like I said, with so many numbers and most of them being kids that never nobody ever took the time to talk to them about anything in prison. They just were going crazy, you know, fighting each other. So they went around the system asking people to see if they voluntarily wanted to go to the prison. Like I said, long story short, we end up going. And at first, I'm not even gonna lie to you, when they approached me with this, I was like, no, you know, I'm working, I'm going to school, and I got a good cellmate. You know, give me a good reason for me to go to Monroe, and the only thing they could come up with was that I can get a single men's cell for myself, you know. And I said, no, you know, that's not gonna happen. But anyways, due to the fact that it was a big problem within us as far as being Latinos, and we were aware of it, because even if I was gonna get transferred somewhere else, I wasn't on jeopardy to get assaulted or to get stabbed or whatever you wanna call it. And so we talked within each other's, and we decided to go and kind of help with the problem. And we did, and the way we did it was to, I guess the system or the people in Monroe was willing to work with us to make it happen. And I think that was the key, to open up a communication with us and them, not to look at us as just, or you guys deserve to be here and we're gonna punish you 100% for it, but open up a communication to where like you can understand us, why we act the way we act sometimes. And it's not so much about just being a knucklehead. A lot of the times it has to be with issues that you deal with your own self or families, you know, that no one knows about, and the only way you can just get rid of it is by acting up. So then again, long story short, the officials, the people at Monroe helped us to talk to our own people, and eventually, I guess, it helped us and them to go from a closed custody facility to a immediate facility. And I can actually say it was a blessing for me to go at the end of the day, because I had the chance to meet so many good people in that place, and you know, they changed my life to the point where that's where I'm here now. I mean, the people that knows me from before can tell you that for me to be here today is a blessing, you know, and I thank with all my heart to those people, and one of them is Mr. Frakes, that he gave me the chance to get connected with post-prison education program. And thanks to them, then I'm going to college right now, shooting for a degree on graphic designs and trying to start a new life.
All right. So in case you haven't noticed, we're running really over time. So we're going to have to wrap it up really quickly here, but we have, all of us have business cards, and some of the panelists have agreed to stick around afterwards so you can talk to them. And I'm just going to let Ari take it from here really quickly.
First of all, Shima's going to get her business cards out and come down, and we're 35 minutes past 9 o'clock when we're supposed to close, and we're really grateful that Town Hall hasn't booted us out yet. But we want to get everybody who has questions, get Shima's business card, email your question to her. If you have a particular panelist that you'd like to address the question, Shima will get the question to the panelists and you will get their answer. So we just have to do that. Cheryl mentioned that Bernie Warner was here a while ago, and I don't know, he may still be here, but Olympia is 65 miles away, and the Secretary of the Department of Corrections is an incredibly busy person, and we really appreciated the fact that he came up to be with us tonight. Johannes Wielden came all the way from some town called Othello, which I think is just a little bit east of South Carolina, to be with us. And obviously Professor Western from all the way from Boston. So we've had an incredible panel, and I'm really indebted. These are incredibly wonderful people, and I'm very appreciative that you're here also. I wanted to say we can't undo the hard lives that our students have lived. But we can provide them with the opportunity to pursue post-secondary education and to build lives worth living for themselves, their families, and their communities. We've got more than 700 applications in our office right now, real number, more than 700 people really crying out for help. More than 8,000 men and women come out of Washington's prisons every month, more than 700 a month, 8,000 a year, excuse me. If you've been moved by what you've heard tonight and the people you've met and the hope and the opportunity that the post-prison education program represents, then we ask you to make what we'd like to call a stretch gift. And define that as an amount that's meaningful to you, that will push your limits a little bit. And for some that might be $5, for some that might be $500, maybe somebody can write a check for $1,000. But please consider what you can do tonight and stop by the donation boxes, and whether it's a check or a cash or fill out a remit envelope and make a pledge. Help us get more people coming out of prison into school and into futures where they don't return to prison. Our recidivism rate, by the way, is less than 2%. And not to slam or embarrass the Department of Corrections, theirs is 43% of people return to prison within 5 years with one or more new felony convictions. In our 6-year history, we've had 2 people recidivate, 1.8% recidivism rate. So it's a great investment, and we hope that you'll really look into your hearts and write a check or make a pledge. Beyond that, I just really want to thank you for coming. It was amazing tonight to look out here. And it was amazing to see this amazing panel. Thank you, every one of you. So, on behalf of the, excuse me, on behalf of the League of Education Voters, Real Change Homeless Empowerment Project, excuse me, project and the Post-Prison Education Program, we're deeply grateful for you having come. Thank you.